Hello, my name is Jonathan Clark. I'm also known around the internet as DJ Bolivia. Welcome to my series on DJing for beginners. I've been a DJ for quite a few years and I've played in about a dozen different countries so far. This video is going to be a very comprehensive overview for beginners, and I'm going to cover a lot of different topics and subjects like ways to perform, styles, genres, beat mixing, scratching and turntablism, lots of different types of equipment like headphones, speakers, CD players, turntables, mixers, effects units. I'm going to talk about licensing. I'm going to talk about programming, set flow, DJ software, doing your own production work, some tips on getting booked, basically all kinds of tips and suggestions about a wide range of subjects. Now this series is something I've wanted to do for about 10 years, to be honest. And when I first decided to put something like this together, the technology just wasn't there. YouTube didn't even exist, and the internet was not ready for what I wanted to do. So I kind of had to shelve that project at the time, and I'm just finally getting around to it again now. Now, you're probably wondering, who am I? What kind of qualifications do I have to teach you how to DJ if you're a beginner? So let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm Canadian. I played lots of instruments growing up, so I know, a fair amount of music theory there, like saxophone, piano, drums, guitar, bass, yeah, all sorts of stuff. Went to university, and my initial plan was to study music, and I thought, well, I don't know if I really want to just end up being a music teacher. And so after that, I decided to go into math computer science. So I did most of the courses in a bachelor's degree in math computer science. Then I decided, no, I want to do business. So I switched into business and did a degree in that. And then after I graduated, I was still working at the university, so I kept taking courses and came pretty close to getting another degree in history and Spanish. And then I decided, well, let's go on and do something even a little bit more professional. So I did a master's in business administration. And then more recently, I decided to study some more and come full loop back around to music, surprisingly. And so I've taken quite a few courses from the Berklee School of Music in the States, in Boston. And I've done a full music program from them, a master's in music theory program, and I've done a master's in music production. Not quite done a couple weeks. So lots of educational background. Now, as far as my career goes, I haven't actually been employed professionally in music for much of my career. And I still do, I spend my summers working in Western Canada doing reforestation work. So basically, people come in and log blocks, cut trees down for paper and wood, and I'm in charge of a group of people that goes in and replants them and tries to help the environment and grow everything back. In addition to that, for many years I ran a nightclub. So I actually did that for about 20 years. So DJing has never been a full-time job for me. DJing was something I did occasionally while I was running the nightclub, and more recently I've done quite a bit of traveling and stuff like that, doing some DJing. So hopefully I can give you a little bit of background from different perspectives, not just as a DJ of working in a club environment, and also working for one-off events, festivals, and I also actually run a mobile DJ business. So I've seen the industry from different sides, and hopefully a little bit of the stuff that I've learned over the years I can share with you. Now, my future plans are, DJing was never a goal of my life. It was something that I kind of fell into. I love listening to music, so it was kind of a natural choice. And my real goals are to really do a lot more work on music production. Producing dance tracks, recording other bands, doing conventional music, alternative rock, and also to do a little bit of teaching, which is kind of funny considering my original university plan was to not teach music. So as far as music, what I like to listen to, it's pretty diverse. I mean, when I'm DJing, I'm usually playing dance music, electronica, tech house, techno, trance, stuff like that. although I don't really listen to that a lot when I'm listening to music, you know, just for fun. I'm more likely to be listening to classic rock, hip-hop, classical music, and, you know, a wide diversity, a little bit of pop and mainstream stuff, and then sometimes, for sure, some EDM, electronica. So that's my background. Now, I'm not sure if, you know, if you're just getting into DJing, you haven't been doing it for very long, I think that this video will give you a ton of information that'll be helpful to you. And, you know, a lot of the stuff that I'm teaching in this video is going to be theory. I'm just going to be telling stories. I'm going to be telling you the way I see things have happened. I'm going to talk about broad concepts, what you should learn, what you may not need to learn right away, overviews of equipment, stuff like that. This video is not going to have any real hands-on stuff, very, very little. You know, I'm not going to be saying this is how a mixer works, stuff like that. Because DJing is far, far more complicated than most people imagine. You know, most people think you show up with a binder full of CDs, you put your headphones on, you press play, music starts, everything's all good to go. But realistically, most people that are starting to learn to DJ probably have to put in close to a year of effort before they're really that good about it, unless they can put a lot of time in every day. Because you've got to learn about the industry, you've got to learn a lot about music, you've got to learn about equipment, you may want to learn about technical stuff like scratching, beat mixing, things like that. You know, there's tons and tons of stuff to learn. So I'm covering a lot of broad stuff in here. Now, if I were to teach everything that I wanted to teach about DJing, I could teach a full year university course and not run out of stuff to say and to show you. So how do I fit all the information that I want to give you into a very short series of videos? Well, the way I figured to do it is when I talk about broad concepts, there's going to be a whole lot of links throughout this video to other videos that I've done. And, you know, if I'm talking about, say, beat mixing on turntables, I may cover that whole section in 3 minutes. But I do have, another video online which goes into beat mixing on vinyl, on turntables, in a lot more depth. So if you want just the quick 3-minute overview, you're listening to the right video. But if you want to go back later and learn about it in a lot more depth, you can go watch that hour-long video that covers turntable beat mixing in a lot more depth. Okay, so basically this series of videos, these 4 videos that are beginning DJing, I mean, they're not short, they're 4 hours long. And you're probably thinking, oh my god, 4 hours, that's out of control. Well, think about this. If you were to read a simple introduction to DJing book, like, say for instance, DJing for Dummies, you know, you're probably going to spend a lot more than 4 hours just going through this book. It's a 360-page book. So, anyway, because this video, this general introduction, is longer than I had hoped that it would be, I've had to break it down into several parts. But within each part, there's going to be links to dozens, well, maybe not dozens, but certainly several other additional videos that you can go to as reference to enhance what you've learned from this series. And, you know, if you're a DJ that's starting out, you may even want to watch this series through from start to finish without branching off to any of those other videos, and then go through a second time and start learning other topics in depth. Now, you don't necessarily have to watch this whole series of 4 videos a second time to find all those links, because the text descriptions underneath all of these videos, I'm going to have a link to my Learn to DJ page on my website, and that will have notes on everything that I've talked about, and it'll also have all those links, so you can just kind of flip through that page to find things. So if you want to find that page, you're going to go to djbolivia.ca/learn2, digit 2, DJ. And that will take you to the full, the blog posting stuff, the website stuff, that gives you this information in print form, and lots of links. So, you're in for the long haul here. There's a lot of stuff to learn. At some point, I'm working on a couple books about DJing, so at some point, once they do become available, which won't be for months and months from right now, I will put a link in this video right now, so you can go check out those books if you're interested. And other than that, I only really have one request. As we go through the rest of this series, I've got maybe another dozen sections broken down into groups of stuff like equipment, beat mixing, this, that, all sorts of stuff, okay? So you don't have to watch this all in one long evening. You can do it in sort of bite-sized chunks so you can absorb it more. But I do have one request. Now, you know, I've spent a bit of time putting this all together. If you think these videos are useful, can you do me a huge favor and share them on one of your social media sites? Like post them on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, a blog, whatever. If you've got a friend who you think might enjoy these, email a link to him, okay? That would be a huge favor. I've got other people have been doing that with my other videos. My tutorial series on YouTube right now is getting maybe just a little bit over 100,000 views a month. So obviously some people are interested in learning these basics about DJing and about other equipment and all that sort of stuff. So if you think these videos are great, I really would appreciate if you share them. Okay, so let's stop talking about the introduction and let's get to work with the first section. Oh, I almost forgot one thing. At the moment, at the time of recording this video series, YouTube was not able to display annotations on mobile devices. Maybe it still can't. So anyway, a lot of people do watch these videos on mobile, and if you can't see any of the links that I'm referring to as being on the screen, check in the text description underneath the YouTube video. All the links will be there, and that way you'll be able to find things that I'm referring to if you need to. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so let's talk for a while about why you would want to DJ and possible different types of DJing that's out there. So, first of all, everybody probably has their own reasons for why they would want to be a DJ. But one common thread that runs through the theme for most people is that, first of all, it's social, and second, it's a lot of fun. And those are very valid reasons for wanting to be a DJ. It is usually pretty fun, and it's definitely a pretty social job. Now, as far as the fun goes, you know, some people maybe take it a little bit too far. A lot of DJs have the reputation for being kind of party animals, whatnot, and you've got to be careful that you don't mix up having fun with maybe partying too much, with maybe drugs and alcohol when you're performing. Okay, so one thing that I definitely recommend to new DJs is don't mix those up. If you're not gonna be sober at some point in the night, that's fine, but wait till after you've performed. Don't have a drink before you've played. Don't be drinking while you're playing. And it's not that I'm against alcohol. I mean, I ran a club for 20 years, and I still bartend. So I'm very pro-alcohol as a person, but I will never ever have a drink before or during a set. And, you know, if you walk into a club as a DJ, it's, you know, within a couple minutes, there's going to be 3 or 4 people that say, hey, do you want a drink? And, you know, they want to have a drink with you, they want to talk and whatnot. And I found, you know, it's actually surprisingly easy to say, thanks, but no, I'm not going to have any drinks until after I've played. You know, it may raise a few eyebrows because some people think, ooh, what's up with this DJ? He's pretty serious. But most of the time, no, that's not a bad thing. And especially, too, well, I mean, some people don't drink, period. But for those of you that do, if you say, I would love to hang out, talk to you as soon as I'm finished playing and let's have a drink together then it kind of reinforces the image of the fun, the social aspects, whatnot. And if you don't drink, you can still say, no, I'm not drinking any alcohol, but I'd love to hang out and talk to you after the show, or now, or whatever. Okay, so, you know, it doesn't have to be all serious. There's also a good point to all this. If you tell somebody that you're not having a drink while you're playing, or before you play, even if they may raise their eyebrow for a second at first, it does get the message across that you take your DJing very seriously, that you're very professional about it. Okay, so there's certain advantages, and certainly one thing I've learned is that anybody who's drunk does not generally perform nearly as well when they're DJing. Okay, you probably think you do because you're drunk, but no, you do a much better job if you're sober. You're more coordinated, you're more alert, aware, you're thinking faster. Now, it's true that a little bit of alcohol might make certain people loosen up. So if you're very nervous and uptight, then I can understand why you might want to have a drink or two before your set. But that's something that goes away after you've played 4 or 5 shows. So yeah, maybe when you first start DJing you're nervous, but it doesn't take long before you start to reach a comfort level, and you'll find you don't need those drinks to loosen up, okay? So think about that. Now, another reason why a lot of people like to DJ is if they like music, because it doesn't really seem like a job. It doesn't seem like work if you like music. You're doing something that you like. It's a lifestyle, not a job, okay? So, one question I get from a lot of people is, can you make a living at being a DJ? To answer that, I think I should really mention different types of DJs that are out there. So the first type would be the mobile DJ. And there are, there's a big need for DJs around the world. And so there are, there's millions of people around the world that work as mobile DJs. I've already done 2 videos actually, about mobile DJing, where I talk about them in much, much more detail than I'm going to talk about here in the next minute. So I'll put a link on the screen to the first of those 2 videos right now, put it in the text description under the YouTube video. But as far as being a mobile DJ goes, I think it's the hardest type of DJ out there. Toughest job. First of all, there's a ton of variety. Like, you might be playing at weddings, at high school dances, at street parties, at proms, at class reunions. You might be playing in bowling alleys, you might be playing at outdoor bandstands, all sorts of variety. And all these different gigs, people have different expectations, and weddings especially, but to a smaller extent, pretty much every different type of mobile show, there's high expectations. And that's one of the reasons that makes it one of the most difficult types of DJing there is. Now, the other thing, too, is that as a mobile DJ, you're not necessarily pegged into one category of music, so you have to know a lot about all kinds of different genres of music. You have to know your dance, your house, your hip-hop, your top 40, your pop, your indie, your alternative, your classic rock, your golden oldies, your wedding songs and ballads. Like, there's just so many different varieties of music that you need to know some information about. So as far as time invested in learning the music and breadth of knowledge, it's very high commitment to be a mobile DJ. Also, you'll find that if you're setting up a mobile rig, it can be pretty expensive. So there's a big financial commitment that is not nearly as big in other types of DJing. So with my own mobile rig, as an example, I've got $20,000 invested in gear. Plus, you have to have a vehicle to be able to move your stuff around. Plus, you have to worry about things like licensing and about insurance. And those things aren't necessarily stuff that you need to know about or to have as a club DJ. So you have to really think about mobile DJing as a business rather than a career, rather than as a job. So, now the good thing about mobile DJing is, at the start, you won't have a name for yourself, you're going to be building a clientele list, and so on. And after a year or so, you're going to be in a position where you're comfortable, you've done a bunch of gigs, it feels like things are flowing. It feels like you know what you're doing, you're comfortable answering questions from clients, you're comfortable giving appropriate prices, and you're getting gigs, and you're getting repeat business, you're getting referrals. As long as you're doing a good job, you'll get all kinds of repeat business. So, at that point, will you be able to make a career of it? Yes, you should be able to have a functioning business without any question if you do a good job. Okay, that first year or so, while you're starting to build the clientele, that's tough. But after that, you can be a full-time business owner doing mobile DJing. Now, another type of DJing is being a resident in a club. And this is probably the position with the industry that's the most coveted. You know, there are literally millions of people around the world that want to be DJs, and you know, a very small percentage of those people, 1 in 100, gets to be a resident DJ at a club, at a decent nightclub. So tons of competition, and if you have to think about nightclubs, quite often are only open on, say, Fridays and Saturdays, or maybe Thursday, Friday, Saturdays. But they're far more likely to be open 2 or 3 nights a week than to be open 6 or 7 nights a week. So, can you make a living doing that? Well, yes, because a good club will recognize the importance of having a good DJ, and they'll know that they have to pay you appropriately. So you can, as a club resident DJ, get by on 2 or 3 nights of DJing a week. Now, it's not necessarily that lucrative, and you may want to do a lot of stuff on the side, like during the early part of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Maybe you'll have a second job. Maybe you'll be doing some mobile DJ gigs on the weekends around your residency, which can be tough because of the hours. But it's possible to make a living, not a fantastic living, but you can probably pay the bills if you're good enough to get a residency of 2 or 3 nights a week at least. But like I say, lots of competition, and I'll talk about that later in the video, about ways to cut through the competition and get yourself a spot as a resident. Some DJs like to focus only on parties and festivals, so they'll be only really playing at one-off events. They'll be playing at warehouse parties, raves, music festivals, outdoor music festivals, stuff like that. So when I talked about mobile DJing, you have to know a huge amount of music from different genres. When you're a resident at a club, it's usually a lot narrower in focus. You may play, depending on the club, maybe it's a club that plays trance music all the time, so you'd only have to know trance well. Or it may be a club that focuses on house, or on hip-hop, or on techno, or more commonly, probably a mix of mainstream, dance, pop. So sort of like a mobile DJ, but more narrowly focused on the more popular music. So in that sense, knowing your music, knowing it's not easier to know it well, because within that genre, you've got to have a much deeper knowledge of your genre, but it's not as broad-based. So that has an appeal to some people. Now, if you get into the festivals and doing one-offs and warehouse parties and stuff like that, it's good because you can really, really narrowly focus on one genre. You will become known as a dubstep DJ, or known as a drum and bass DJ, or known as a breaks DJ. Okay, so you'll get bookings based on this, and you'll be able to get very good at what you do because you're focusing on a more narrow segment of the overall music industry. And that's good if you like a particular style of music. If you're the sort of person that only likes drum and bass and doesn't like pop music, doesn't like classic rock, stuff like that, you're going to have a hard time as a mobile DJ. If that's the case, you probably want to focus on building a career for a very specific style, and you'll just have to deal with the fact that there's not nearly as many shows. So if you're doing that sort of approach, chances are very high you will not be making a living at this. Incredibly high. People that choose this route usually do it for fun and for love of the music, and that's it. You look at the literally millions of DJs around the world. How many of them are successful A-list DJs who can play at clubs all over the world, set up tours, do festivals, and make a lot of money? You know, how many people out there are named Tiesto? How many Armin van Buurens are there? Sasha, Digweed, people like that. That's just a few classic names. Really, there's only a couple thousand DJs in the world that reach that A-list level, okay? So chances are you are not going to be one of those DJs. But if you're okay with doing it on a more limited scale, just doing it for fun, doing some festivals, doing some stuff in your local region, sure. Just don't expect to make a living of it. Another type of DJ that a lot of people don't think about is being a radio DJ. Now, radio is having, I see it as having problems right now because there's been a big migration from analog radio, from terrestrial broadcast radio, to digital streaming radio through the internet. And, you know, if all of a sudden people are listening less and less to traditional radio and more to the internet, to streams, then that's bad for radio, traditional radio, because they're supported by advertising dollars, usually. And if there's less people listening, it's harder to break in those advertising dollars. So I think with a lot of terrestrial, traditional radio stations, you're seeing a shift where the stations are either converting to a pure digital format, which is especially common for smaller stations. For some of the bigger stations, like a city station or a regional station, they may not go to pure digital format, but they may very likely will branch out so that they're also doing streaming instead of just their conventional airwave broadcasts. In other cases, you're going to be seeing radio stations that are closing because they're just not financially feasible anymore. It's either they're not getting the advertising dollars, or they're not getting the financial support from voluntary contributors. Because if the station doesn't have people listening to it, why support it? Okay? But having said that, radio DJing, there's tremendous opportunity out there. There's literally millions of radio stations around the world, and they need people to do the programming and to do the voiceovers and to pick the music and stuff like that. Now, it's certainly a different approach that in comparison to the other types of DJing that I mentioned, because when you're in radio, in broadcast, you're doing a lot more than just music. You're doing far more talking, far more other types of programming. You're dealing with advertising and stuff like that. But if you like DJing, it's pretty fascinating. And, you know, you may, when you start out, have a hard time getting a good spot. But if you've got a good voice and a good on-air personality, then you may have to start on weekends or starting with the night shift, the overnight. But, you know, eventually you're going to, hopefully, if you're good, you'll get bumped up to a more visible position. And either way, it's a job, it's a salary, it's regular money. And again, it's something that's pretty fun. I've worked at radio stations off and on for quite a while. And yeah, all kinds of fun. So, if you're interested in DJing and you want something a little bit more reliable and consistent, consider the radio station approach, especially if you've got a good voice. Okay. How to make it big? Well, if you're in mobile DJing, you don't really have to make it big. It's more that you start getting you get well known in your local area, and so you start getting repeat bookings and stuff like that. As for being a resident, once you've got your foot in the door as a resident, then it's all, you know, it's referrals. If you've got if you're respected for doing a good job at one club and you work there on Fridays and Saturdays, a new club, say it has a spot open up on Thursday nights, they may say, hey, let's get what's his name from that club because he's not working on Thursdays, and so you can get a spot there. But as far as making it big, in a more general sense, like I'm talking about the people that play at festivals and that do touring and stuff like that. Well, the only way to really succeed in that sort of respect, because that's where there's so much competition, well, there's a couple things you can do. First of all, practice, practice, practice constantly. There's so many other DJs out there that if you don't do a great job technically, there will be other people who are better than you out there. So make sure you spend a lot of time practicing before you expect to go too far. And even as a mobile DJ and the other things too, practice never hurt a person. If you want to get big individually, you should also think about marketing. You need a good online presence. So you need a website. You need things like Facebook, Twitter, SoundCloud, YouTube. Those are all big at the moment. There's other stuff that's coming up. And some of those things like, you know, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, SoundCloud, some of those services probably are not going to be that big in another 3 or 4 years. They'll go the way of like MySpace or Friendster. But take advantage of them while they're there. And also, don't just count on having a whole bunch of likes or a whole bunch of followers on any of these services and saying that's good enough. What you want to do is take advantage of the fact that they're there and interact with them. Like for instance, on my Facebook page, I've got thousands and thousands of fans there, but a big chunk of them are not useful to me because they come on my page once for who knows what reason, they click like, they disappear and they never look at it again. But I have a much smaller percentage of my users who post regularly. You know, they'll ask intelligent questions, they'll make comments on my mixes, and I kind of end up, you know, those names I see over and over again, and it's nice because I actually get to sort of carry online conversations out with them, and over time, kind of get to know them, even though I may have never met them in person. And that's good, because a fan like that is much more valuable than, you know, 20 random people that click like on your website and never come back again, because that's a true fan, and that's someone that you can interact with. And it's kind of neat to go to a different city and someone come up to you after a show and he or she says, hey, I am blah blah blah, I've asked you, you know, some questions on your Facebook page, on your YouTube videos, and you know, sometimes I'll recognize their name even and go, oh yeah, I totally remember who you are. And it's kind of neat. Yeah, it's very neat to actually meet people like that. So you need an online presence. You need a website. You should have some traditional ways of publicizing yourself, like maybe some t-shirts with your name on it that you can give out to friends. You may want to print off some bumper stickers. You definitely want to print off some good-looking business cards. And I've seen some terrible business cards for DJs. You know, it's nice to have color and something that's really flashy, but be careful, because colored business cards can really kind of blend together and it's hard to tell what it says. Yeah, be careful with that. Anyway, stuff like that. Promo CDs. Promo CDs may be worth less and less in the future, because I think CDs are disappearing. You know, a lot of laptops nowadays don't have CD readers. So who knows, maybe putting mixes on USB sticks and handing them out to people. That's fine. Maybe even handing out bumper stickers with a QR code on it. So somebody with a QR reader on their phone, they can snap a picture, takes them to a website or to one of your mixes that they can download. Okay? So traditional marketing is always good if you want to become bigger, become well known. Part of becoming a big DJ is luck. And by luck, I don't mean so much random chance, although that can be part of it. But luck is influenced by, first of all, putting the effort in, preparing yourself, and secondly, being in the right place at the right time. So let's say that you've gone to a club several times that you'd like to DJ at someday. You've introduced yourself to the resident DJ there. You've introduced yourself to the staff. You're not being annoying. You're just kind of, you know, talking to them, meeting them. And eventually that DJ gets to know that you're a DJ also, and maybe eventually will listen to one or two of your mixes. Now let's say that same DJ on a Friday night is getting sick, and the person he regularly calls to fill in for him can't show up. And so he thinks, oh yeah, that guy or that girl, I should give him a call. They look around and they have your business card because you gave out your business card. They call you up, and you know it's 6:30 on a Friday night, and they say, "Can you take my slot tonight? You know, you got to be there in 2.5 hours." And if you're prepared because you've always been practicing, you've got your stuff together, you're ready for a last-minute call, and you can say, "Boom, yeah, I'll do it for sure." Show up, boom, you make a name for yourself if you do a good job. And all of a sudden you're on the list as a backup DJ, and you start getting called more often by all the DJs because you're available and you were able to do a good job at the last minute. Okay, so you might think that's luck because the guy got sick that was supposed to play, but it's not just luck. It's also preparation, background, being ready, being prepared, okay? And the final thing, if you want to become big, and this takes a lot of investment, you have to be pretty committed, it's to become a producer. And becoming a producer is even harder than becoming a DJ. I mean, anyone can learn how to produce a track quickly in the space of a couple of weeks, but to do a really good job, it takes years, literally, to learn. Like, if you're starting out DJing, you might be able to do a mediocre to adequate job after a month or 3 months, but it's really only a couple of years of effort and practice and learning the industry that you get to be pretty decent. Same thing with producing. You know, you can put something together quickly, but after a couple of years of it, lots of practice, you can get pretty good. And think about it. If you're a DJ and you get booked for a festival, a big festival, maybe after that one show, 20,000 people see you in one small corner of the globe. And so, that's one of the best things that you can hope for as a DJ, is to have a big show like that. But in the end, it's 20,000 people in one corner of the world that know who you are. On the other hand, thanks to the internet, if you can produce a decent track of your own that gets picked up and gets a lot of YouTube play, a lot of streaming play, gets picked up by a couple big DJs, maybe, as a long shot, you even luck out and gets played on BBC One on somebody's Essential Mix or something like that. If you get something like that, even a moderate volume, it could be that tens of thousands of people all around the world all of a sudden have access to your song. And they play it time and time over if they like it. And so you're getting literally millions of people exposures out of this over the long term. So being a producer can open doors that being a DJ never can do. And you should also think that, there's literally millions of people out there in the world that want to be DJs that are competing for those positions. There's maybe there's 10,000 really good producers out there. So there's a much smaller number of producers. So if you're good, it's much easier to make an impact as a producer than it is as just a good DJ. And realistically, look at the top 100 DJs list on DJ Mag in any given year. Almost every single one of those people is a producer. They write their own music, okay? Follow their lead. Learn to produce if you really want to become good as a DJ in the long run. But realize that it will take you a little bit of time. Just like DJing, lots of practice. Lots of practice.
The music, the music, the music, the music.
All right, so next let's talk about some different ways to perform. And the different ways that you'd perform as a DJ are basically impacted by the types of media that you use. So when people started DJing, and when I say this, I mean like the 1970s, before I started DJing for sure. But back then, from what I understand, there were 3 main ways to DJ. You could use vinyl records, you could use cassette tapes, or 8-track tapes, which is basically another type of magnetic tape, or you could bring in some live instrumentation, either some early drum machines, although those were pretty rare, early synthesizers, or live instrumentation. So, looking at DJing in a more classical sense, like say since the late 1980s, early 90s, so this would be sort of maybe a decade or so after hip-hop really and rap really were introduced, created, and maybe the pre-beginning of the rave era with more electronic music. So looking at that era, vinyl records were the biggest type of media. So a vinyl record came in a couple different sizes typically. The main size was either a 12-inch, and here's an example of a 12-inch record. Okay, this is 2 tracks called Drama and Ignition Sequence by Axis of Evil, and so that's a full-size record. That's a 12-inch. It's called a 12-inch single because there's only a single song on each side. You can also have an LP, which stands for long play, and the difference between the two is that the grooves are a lot more compact, tighter together on an LP, which means there's more music that can be put onto each side. Now, if you want a little tidbit about dynamics, I believe, I'm not 100% sure about this being correct, but I believe that the optimum length of music for one side of a 12-inch record is about 12 minutes long. And all that happens is if you add more time to that, you just have to make the grooves closer together, which means squishing them, making them thinner in order to fit everything on the record. And basically for every 15 seconds roughly of extra time above that 12 minutes that you make the side of the record, you're losing about 1 decibel of dynamic range as you make the grooves closer together. So basically, you know, if you've got something that's, say, an extra 7 minutes above that basic 12 minutes, so you've got a 19-minute side on a record, then you're looking at 7 minutes times 4 decibels lost per minute. So you're looking at a total decibel range of, you know, maybe 80 decibels from the very quietest moments from the noise floor up to full volume on the record. So you're losing some dynamic range when you squish stuff together. So record quality is always going to be higher on a 12-inch single than on an LP, and higher on a 12-inch single than on a 7-inch single. Okay, and what else can I tell you about records? Records, 12-inch records usually had a very small hole in the center for the spindle, and a 45, which was the name for some 7-inch records, often had a much bigger hole, and so you had to put a little insert in there to make the record fit over the spindle of the turntable. And there's a couple different names for these records too. Most of these bigger records with an LP, they were usually meant to be played back at 33 1/3 revolutions per minute. And with a lot of the older turntables, you had 3 different speeds: 78 RPM, and 78 was used on the very earliest records decades and decades and decades ago, and that speed was probably pretty much phased out by the 1960s, I would guess. And besides 78 RPM, you have 45 RPM, which is fast, but not as fast. And those usually were, you know, when people talk about 45, they mean one of the smaller 7-inch singles that would be played at 45 RPM. And for the 12-inch singles, there's a mix. I would say probably 3/4 of the 12-inch singles that I'm used to were played at 33 1/3, and the other quarter were played at 45. And for an LP, it was usually 33 1/3 RPM. Now, something neat about a vinyl record is, let me see if I can hold it up to the light. You can see the dark band in the middle reflecting there. The amount of audio data in the grooves on a record, when you look at it with the light reflecting off it at a certain angle, you can see a difference in some of the grooves based on how much volume basically is in that area of the groove. So if you've got a section, a breakdown, which is usually quieter, there's less audio data there, there's less dynamic range, you're going to end up having a blacker, darker band on your record. And that was neat, because if you're a DJ and you're playing, you can kind of look at the record sideways and you can see when there's a dark band coming up. And so you can visually know in advance when a quiet section is coming up on the record. And I will point out one other thing too. We talk about grooves on a record. That's maybe a misleading term. Technically, a 12-inch record has 2 grooves. That's it. One on each side. Because it's not really a whole bunch of grooves, a whole bunch of circles. It's just one long continuous groove, one huge long spiral that goes around until you get to the middle of the record. Okay, anyway, moving on from vinyl temporarily. CD players were the next big thing. And I'm sure you've all seen CDs. These are 12 centimeters across, and DVDs that came out afterwards, same size. And a CD typically would hold, if it was burned as an audio CD, would typically hold 74 minutes of music. And with some CDs and with some burners, you could actually burn a little bit extra data onto your CD. So you could get sometimes up to 79 or 80 minutes of music. Although that was kind of a risky process, because those CDs with more than 74 minutes sometimes wouldn't play in certain players. So always risky to burn that way. Nowadays with computers, you can also burn data onto CDs. So computer files, text documents, PDFs, audio files that are not in an audio, like a CD audio format. They could be in a like a WAV file, AIFF, MP3 format, stuff like that. That's the data type of file for a music file that a computer understands. And CDs, if you're burning data onto a CD, I think 700 megabytes is about the average storage capacity of a DVD. And so if you're putting MP3s onto a DVD as MP3s, as data, rather than as audio files, you can actually fit quite a bit more onto a single CD than you could burning it as audio. So MP3s, they started becoming popular in the late 1990s. When we first started using MP3s, everyone that was using them, we were either ripping a CD, like taking a CD and converting it using a software program, a ripper program, converting it to an MP3 file, and then we could, put that MP3 file on a different computer or whatever, listen to it that way. There was a lot of trading of MP3s that was initially done through IRC chat rooms and through stuff like Merck. And it was slow. Everybody back then was on dial-up, pretty much. So it was very, very time-consuming for someone to share an MP3 with somebody else. And because it was so slow, because transfer speeds were so slow, people went with very low bit rates because it made the file smaller. So you'd see a lot of MP3s back then that were in 128 kilobits per second bit rate, which is very low by today's standards, or even 64 or 96. And back then, people could encode them to what's kind of the generally accepted highest standard for an MP3, which is 320 kilobits per second. But very few people did that because they took up so much space on hard drives, and hard drives were smaller back then. So there was less room for them on your computer, and it was slow to transfer them. So people went with the smaller MP3s, which unfortunately are lower quality. So anyway, at one point, Napster, a program called Napster, came along. And so people started sharing music on a massively large scale, lots of piracy. And that, Napster probably did more to advance modern music, and not just DJing, but just the music industry, all music industries in general. Napster probably has done more to advance music that way, especially the move to digital music, than any other development in the last 50 years. Just massive spread of sharing of music with the advent of Napster. And nowadays people don't use Napster. They use, if they're trying to share illegal pirated music, they'll use services like SoulSeek, torrent sites, stuff like that. Although that's becoming less and less of an issue now. A lot of record companies were very stressed out about all this piracy because they said that they were losing money. But lately, there's been a lot of argument with that whole point of view, because some people take the view that the spread of free music has enlightened a lot of people about other bands that are available, that are out there. And so sometimes people will listen to one or two songs that they got for free because they're pirated, they'll like the band and they'll go out and buy that band's music. Now, I wouldn't say that's a very legitimate argument to justify the use of piracy, but I'm sure it is fairly accurate in some cases. Certainly, if anything, the shift to using MP3s has, if nothing else, it's taken away a lot of the power from the big record companies and put it in the hands of smaller individual artists. So maybe that's a good thing in some ways. So anyway, once digital files became available, well, actually, once CDs became available, DJs realized that most CD players had a limitation because, you know, some of them had gotten used to being able to pitch shift the speed of a vinyl record on a turntable with the Technics 1200 turntables that were so popular. And so then companies started coming out with CD players that were designed for commercial use that you could pitch shift the CD player. And so, you know, some of the early brands back then were like Denon and stuff like that. I think Denon had the first pitch-controlled CD player that I ever used. And then Pioneer sort of became an industry leader. So that was neat. But then one of the drawbacks of these pitch-controlled CD players is that artists couldn't do the same trick that they used to with the vinyl and be able to kind of look at it sideways and see where the breakdowns were, see where the more energetic and less energetic parts of the song were. So turntables started getting displays in them, waveform displays. And that waveform display would let the DJ know basically where the peaks and valleys are in the music, roughly. So you've got a rough idea of where the loud and quiet sections are in a song. So that was a nice development for CD players. Now, after MP3s started becoming popular, people started DJing a little bit with computers and MP3s. And it wasn't very fancy back then. For instance, in the late 1990s, I did a bit of DJing where I would take a desktop computer to a gig, set it up, and then I'd use Winamp, which is, you know, it was one of the biggest music players of its day, and, you know, I even still use it occasionally. But what you could do with Winamp was you could open 2 copies of Winamp. You could check a box in the preferences that said allow multiple instances. So you could open 2 of them, and then as a song is fading out in one, you could start it playing in the other, and so you could do the overlapping, mixing back and forth between songs. Now, you couldn't really do beat mixing, certainly not on a proper scale, but for radio mixing, a couple instances of Winamp, yeah, seemed to work, and I certainly wasn't the only DJ that did that. Now, eventually, after a few years, some more fancy stuff started to be developed, specifically for DJs. So an example is a program called Final Skratch by Traktor. And this was kind of you may have heard of Serato Skratch. Well, Traktor and Serato kind of worked together for a bit. It's a long story. I'll talk about that elsewhere. But anyway, Final Skratch was kind of the original program that would let a DJ manipulate a digital file on a computer by using traditional methods. And so that you'd get a piece of vinyl which looks like a record, and it's got time encoding data in the record. And so you'd play that record on the turntable, and the data from the record would be transmitted to a box, a hardware interface, and that box would always be able to tell how far through the record the needle was based on the information that was coming from the record. And so the software in the computer would know how far through the song the music should be playing at any given time. So that was pretty awesome. I DJ'd with that a lot. And it was kind of neat to be able to using traditional vinyl handling methods on a turntable and be playing classic rock songs and stuff like that that you had bought on CD, but you didn't have a copy of on vinyl. So that was a nice development. And that was, for me, that was big in the early 2000s, 2003, 2004. The next major development, I think, would be hybrid decks. And you'll hear people talk about a deck, and I think originally a deck was a slang term for a turntable, but because we have CD players and all sorts of other stuff now, deck is kind of more of a slang term for generic music player. So you can talk about your vinyl decks, you can talk about your CD decks. So anyway, they came out with hybrid decks, which would have a turntable, so you could play vinyl on them. They'd have a CD unit in the side, and you'd also be able to play MP3s. And that was kind of neat. It was a really good idea. And unfortunately, I don't know if any of those are still in production today, just because there wasn't enough demand for them. I think too many people got away from vinyl and just stopped using vinyl completely. They moved to digital music. CDs are digital. And I mean, CDs are technically a form of digital music, but you know what I mean. Physical digital data versus computer-based digital data. So another factor which led to the decline of vinyl was the cost. So if I'm about to go out and buy, you know, a nice drum and bass record, this record probably cost me $15, something like that, for a single record, which is only 2 songs. And once people could start buying CDs, then they could get 10 or 12 songs on a CD for the same price as a vinyl record. Now, certainly, instead of buying a 12-inch single, I could have bought an LP with 10 or 12 songs for the same price, but it goes back to the dynamic range being reduced on a CD, on an LP. So why buy an LP for the same price as a CD when the audio quality of the CD is so much better? Because the CD didn't have that limitation. As long as you stayed under 74 minutes, you're going to have fantastic quality on a CD, whereas, you know, the vinyl quality was only good for up to 12 minutes per side. So that was a big contributor to the downfall of vinyl. Certainly, music piracy was a big contributor to the downfall of vinyl, and maybe to a small extent to CDs too, because, you know, so many people were pirating music. So that's kind of the evolution from vinyl through CD and through to digital devices. Now, because digital music is so popular now, a lot of DJs are using laptops for DJing. And there's tons of programs out there. There's, you know, Virtual DJ, Serato, Atomics, Tractor, all sorts of stuff. And I'll get into those in detail later in this video. But basically, all these digital DJ programs, they're simple and they're easy to use because if you've got a laptop, you can do all your DJing on there without having to buy extra equipment. And a lot of people own a laptop or owned a laptop. And so why bother spending, say, $1,500 on a mixer and 2 CD players or a mixer and 2 turntables when you can spend $150 on some software and use your laptop and you saved yourself $1,350. Also, it's a lot easier to carry a lot of music around on a single laptop than it is to carry crates and crates and crates of records, or even binders full of CDs. So that was another reason that led to the popularity of laptop DJ software. Now, some DJs, especially the older ones, often look down on the new generation of DJs who are doing everything on computer. And they'll say, well, that's not DJing. That's, you know, real DJing is using vinyl or whatever. And I can understand that concern because when you've put in, you know, thousands of hours of practice to learn to mix on turntables, and then you see somebody else going and they're using DJ software where basically they push a couple buttons, it's all synchronized, and there's a lot less skill, I can see why the old school DJs are upset with this and look down on this type of DJing. However, I will also say that for a lot of people on the dance floor, they may not be watching the DJ. They may have no idea how he or she is performing. They have no idea about their skills. All that they know is they're out in the corner of the dance floor. They can hear the music. They can't see the DJ. And the only way they're going to judge the DJ is by what they hear. And so in that case, what really matters? What comes out of the DJ's booth, or the technical skills that they are using to make that stuff come out? See, there's the problem. Because for a lot of people, the music is what matters, not how the DJ does it. And so if you've got a DJ who has invested, say, 2,000 hours in learning how to beat mix on vinyl, versus another DJ who spent 50 hours using the time to learn to play the program, and then spent another 1,450 hours on learning music, broadening their experience in all sorts of other stuff, then who's the better DJ? They've each spent 1,500 hours. They've each invested a lot of time into trying to produce a better product for their dance floor. And, you know, in some ways, the vinyl DJ may be less versatile because they're stuck with playing one track after another, maybe mixing in and out a couple times, but, you know, it's a very sequential thing. Whereas the laptop DJ may have the ability to bring in multiple tracks, you know, more than just 2-3 tracks at a time. They can bring in extra loops. They have more time to focus on effects. They may have more knowledge of the genres they're playing because they've spent a lot of time researching music instead of learning how to beat mix. So the argument, you know, it can go either way. And I'm certainly not going to take sides on it because I can see both. I can see the points of view of both camps. I learned to beat mix on vinyl, so I love playing on vinyl, and I also do use a laptop to play sometimes, so I can see the advantages of the laptop. I love playing on vinyl. It's fun. It feels good. But there are so many drawbacks of playing on vinyl, and not just the time invested to learn, not just the fact that it's hard to carry records around if you've got to bring a couple hundred records somewhere. There's the fact that it's hard to find records anymore. It's sad, but you know, a lot of technologies change in the world, and the people that seem to get the most unhappy, bitter about new technologies are the ones that fear change. They've spent their time learning a certain system, learning a certain skill, and then when something new comes along, then they're understandably unhappy because somebody who hasn't put in all that time on the first system can learn the new system and maybe be just as good, but didn't put the time in. And so not only has the first DJ put in the time on the original system, they also have to spend additional time to learn the same stuff that the new guy's doing. So yeah, I can kind of see why the old school DJs are a little bitter about that. And I just don't let myself be bitter. You know, there's definitely some advantages of using a laptop. And when new DJs are asking what's the best way to learn, I honestly have to say you're probably better off starting off using a laptop and learning about a lot of things instead of just focusing on beat mixing, because you can learn a lot about different types of music. You know, the learning curve on a laptop is a lot less steep than on vinyl. And what I do recommend is if you get up to speed on a laptop, then at least you can start performing and stuff like that. And if you want to learn to play on vinyl or on CD players, I do recommend that you learn it if you want to be a well-rounded DJ. I just wouldn't recommend anymore that you learn vinyl first. Vinyl is the hardest to mix. Why start with the hardest? Start with a laptop and then start branching out, diversifying, and making yourself a better all-around DJ later if you want. Something I didn't cover, live performance art, live PA. And that's kind of like when a band is performing, although it's more of a mixture of the two technologies. It's a mixture of DJing or live production combined with live instrumentation. So you might be using the laptop to play loops, to play background beats, to play drum tracks. You might be using a drum machine to augment the laptop or instead of the laptop. You might have some synths on stage. So live PA is kind of it's a merging of technologies. And some DJs are doing that to stand out from the crowd and doing a very good job of it. So it's kind of neat to see somebody who's DJing and then in the middle of their set, they pick up a guitar and they're playing along with the music. Or they pick up a trumpet or a saxophone, they're playing along with the music. More commonly, maybe they've got a keyboard set up or a drum kit, electronic drum kit, who knows, drum pads even, and they're playing along. Or you see somebody like Colette, who will sing live, because she's got a great voice, and so she'll sing her own tracks live as she's playing the instrumentals underneath. So live PA is another development. So what's the future hold? I mean, we've seen obviously so many changes in media and performance styles over the last 30, 40 years, then you've got to think, well, maybe things will keep changing. And that's a good way to look at it. So let's think about the future. Tablets. We're already seeing apps on tablets where people can use just a tablet or even just their phone and do full-scale DJing, which, if you put them in a room with a curtain so the audience can't see them, it wouldn't sound any different than somebody who was DJing on CD players 10 years ago, perhaps. And of course, some of these apps on phones and tablets have all sorts of effects and stuff built in, so you wouldn't be able to tell that they're not using a traditional style DJ mixer with EQ buttons and all the standard effects. So think about that. Tablets and phones are something you need to think about for the future if you're a DJ. I'm not recommending that you use them, but I have no doubt that in another 5 or 10 years, they could be more common in the industry than anything else. And, tablets and phones are getting so powerful. Yeah, they can probably do anything. What else might be possible in the future? Let your imagination run wild. We're seeing the beginning of things like wearable clothing. So what's to say that, clothing won't be designed with microprocessors and storage in them so that your music library is carried inside your shirt. And so, you're walking along the street, whatever, and you can press buttons on your cuff or something and change the music, which plays out of speakers in the cuffs of your shirt. There's all sorts of potential for the future. You might have cars with computers in them so that when you're driving down the highway, you're listening to, who knows, Better Off Alone by Alice DJ. And you think, oh, that would mix really well with One More Time by Daft Punk. And so you just say, computer, mix in One More Time by Daft Punk. And the computer will beat mix that for you. So there's all kinds of crazy ideas that could happen in the future. Right now, though, let's focus on what's here now. So laptops, CD players, still by far the most common things in today's industry. And if you can master using those, you're going to be pretty versatile. Now, there's all kinds of different styles of DJing and all kinds of different techniques used. So I think I want to cover those next. Styles. Okay, there's different mixing styles. First of all, beat mixing, also known as beat matching, happens when you have two songs that have a fairly similar beat, fairly similar tempo, and this usually happens with songs that have a rhythm section, so there's drums, and they have a constant beat. It's usually constant time signatures, usually 4/4 time, quite often found in different types of dance music, different types of electronic music, although hip hop and rap sometimes are beat mixed to some extent. Not quite the same. We'll talk about that in a second. But basically, beat mixing or beat matching happens when you have one song going at a certain tempo, and then the new song that's coming in, you speed up or slow down the incoming record so it matches the tempo of the first record, and then you bring the volume up slowly and have it so that the beats of the two songs are happening at the same time for a little while, maybe 15, 20, 30 seconds, maybe longer. And then, as the crowd is getting used to the new song, because they can hear both at the same time, and they haven't lost any of their momentum dancing because the beat has been constant throughout, and then the DJ starts fading out the old song so that it's just the new song that's playing. And this continuity between the two songs makes people stay on your dance floor longer, because usually they'll use the excuse of the end of a song to think, okay, I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to go to the bar, get a drink, go to the bathroom, whatever. But this constant beat mixing was partially as a way to just try and keep crowds on the dance floor longer. Okay, so there's another type of mixing called radio mixing. That's what I call it. Some people call it drop mixing or chop mixing. And, well, no, not quite the same. Let's say with radio mixing, that would be more appropriate for a genre like rock and roll, classic rock, something like that, where the tempos of the songs are incredibly different. The drum patterns and styles may be different. The time signatures may be different. And so what happens, let's say that you've got a song playing and you're getting near to the end of the song. And so what you'll do is, the new song is not playing yet. You'll have the volume set on the channel so it's ready for full volume. And then as this track starts fading out and getting quieter, you'll, boom, hit play on the CD player or whatever for the next song. It will come in overlapping the last song, and then you fade the other one out. So there's no continuity in the beats. You just have to kind of intuitively pick the best time to bring the new song in over top of the old song. So there may be some overlap for sure, but it's not at a constant tempo, not blending as well. And so the reason I call that radio mixing is that's what usually happens on radio stations, unless you're talking about an electronica station. But that's kind of the traditional mixing of music that people did for many, many years. And if you're playing, even if you're playing in a club nowadays, if you're in a mainstream club that starts out with some pop and alternative and classic rock and stuff like that at the beginning of the night, then you're probably doing radio style mixing for the good part of the night, for the beginning, okay? And drop mixing is something that I also use to refer to the same style as radio mixing, because what happens is, as another song is fading out, you drop in the next one instantly. Chop mixing, I guess, is slightly different. It's the same sort of concept where a new song comes in suddenly, and there may be some overlap of the music between the two, but there's not the continuity, not the beat mixing. And what that might be more appropriate for is, let's say that you've got some styles like dubstep, breaks, drum and bass, hip-hop to some extent. For those styles, it's like you're kind of beat mixing, but the drums are so busy and the patterns of the two songs are so disharmonious, that they don't necessarily sound good when they're both playing at the same time. So what you do is you kind of do the equivalent of beat mixing, so you get the tempo synced, but at a certain point, like the change to a new phrase in the music, a new bar, you'll drop one song out and you'll throw the other in really quickly. So you do have a continuity in beats, but you've never really had the overlapping of the two songs playing at the same time. It's one out and one in simultaneously, flipping from one to the other. So that's chop mixing. Yeah, so that's more commonly used in dubstep, drum and bass, breaks, hip hop. As far as beat mixing, you're going to see that in the electronica styles most of the time. So things like house, deep house, tech house, progressive house, tribal house, all kinds of house. You'll see it in techno, you'll see it in trance, stuff like that. And sometimes you'll see that in the other broken beats sort of styles of dance music, like breaks to some extent in drum and bass, depending on the type of drum and bass. Maybe jazzy or liquidy drum and bass is more likely to actually get some beat mixing instead of chop from one song to another. Now there's another thing, turntablism. And I don't have a turntable in front of me, but I do have CD turntables. And you've probably seen turntablists work before, and they're doing a lot of tricks called scratching, beat juggling, between a couple different records, couple different decks. And unfortunately, that's not something I'm skilled at, and so I'm not going to be able to do a good job of teaching you. I'll try to find a link to a video, put it down here, of someone else who does a good job of teaching all that stuff. There's all kinds of different scratching moves. There's forward scratching, backward scratching, baby scratching, scribbles, cuts, chops, chirps, crab, transformers, flares, twiddles, tons of different scratch moves. And it would be awesome if I knew how to do all of that well, because then that'd be a fantastic tutorial series. So maybe one of my friends in the future can assist me with that. With turntablism, you have to think about things like making sure the needle's not skipping off the record. You have to know a whole lot about the different types of needles, different stylus, different cartridges, how to work anti-skating, all kinds of stuff that's unique to turntables. So it's a very exacting science. It's tough to do well. I think what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to put a link to a video. One of my friends from here in Canada, who actually grew up very close to me, just down in Halifax, his stage name is the Skratch Bastid, and he is a world-renowned turntablist, highly skilled. So I'm going to put a link right here to a song called a scratch set he did of a song called Long Train Running by the Doobie Brothers. Classic rock track. Take 5 minutes as a break from me and watch this video. You will love it. He's so good. Okay. What else? Taking requests. Okay, depending what style you're playing, you may or may not commonly have to take requests or get to take requests. If you're playing in a club that plays trance music, techno, stuff like that, chances are very low that you'll be getting requests, because in a club like that, there's different ways that people dance and different ways that people respond to DJs, which are kind of associated with styles. So if you're looking at a trance, house, techno club, drum and bass, breaks, stuff like that, then quite often that type of club, it's conventional for people, instead of dancing with each other, facing each other, everyone is kind of dancing facing the front, facing the DJ. And that's because they're there not necessarily to socialize with each other. They're there because they're counting on the DJ to give a performance, to take them on a musical voyage, journey. And in a situation like that, generally the mindset is that the DJ understands that genre well, and it's not about an individual song. It's about the continuity of a couple hours of music that flow together. And so in a case like that, the dancers generally, they trust the DJ to know what to play, to do something interesting. And so there's very few requests for a DJ who plays in that style. On the other hand, if you're playing mobile DJing, where you have access to people of all kinds of different musical backgrounds and tastes, being able to come up and talk to you, then you are going to get requests. If you're playing in a mainstream club, where perhaps in the early part of the night you're playing a mix of slow pop, hip hop, alternative, and classic rock. And then later on, as the night gets going, dance floor gets busy, club gets crowded, you start playing higher energy pop, top 40 dance music, a little bit of house, stuff like that. If you're in a situation like that, you're probably going to get a lot of requests. And to be honest, sometimes the requests can be really, really quite frustrating, quite annoying. Because thinking back to a show I played a couple of weeks ago, I was in the middle, it was at a mainstream club, and I was in the middle of a set of high energy dance music, club dance music, at like 128, 129 beats per minute. And somebody came up and they wanted to hear a song by Van Halen. And classic rock by Van Halen does not fit very well into the middle of a club dance music set. So, a lot of DJs kind of get the mindset that requests are a bad thing, because instead of focusing on the times that you can take a request and keep someone happy, they focus upon the times when the request doesn't match the mood of the music, the style of the music that they're playing at the time. They focus on the fact that, they're annoyed by the request or something like that. So try not to let that happen to you. Don't look at a request as being something annoying. Think of it as an opportunity to make somebody happy. And you won't always make them happy. There's no way around it. There's some ridiculous requests out there. I remember DJing, actually no, I was bartending one night, but I was hanging out in the DJ booth early in the night with my friend, Sean Cole from Vancouver, and he was DJing, and a girl came up to the request window and said, "Can I hear a song by Fish?" And Sean and I looked at each other, and then he looked back at the girl and he said, "But the song that's playing right now is by Fish." And she said, "Well, in that case, I would like a different song by Fish." And she stomped off. So, you're going to get some requests that are kind of ridiculous. Things that don't fit the format. And sometimes, some DJ booths have a posted music format. And you can point to the sign and say, I'm sorry, I'd like to keep you happy, but I have to play stuff that'll fit the format. You're going to hear all kinds of requests for why you should play this person's song. You could say, you're going to hear people saying, "But it's my birthday." I've seen people that have birthdays 7 nights in 1 month, apparently, because they keep coming up using that excuse to make a request. And, I've seen people that come up and say, "I'd like to hear this song." And you say, "Okay, I'll play that. But I was thinking about playing that during a higher energy part of the night, so you'll hear it in about 40 minutes. And then they'll say, "But I was just leaving. I want to hear it now." Well, if they're just leaving, why are you trying to keep them happy? Anyway, don't let requests frustrate you. Think of them as an opportunity. And it's also good because a lot of times, keep a pen and paper there, because if somebody comes up with a request that you don't know the song or you don't have the song, write it down, because that's how I learn a lot of new music that I hadn't heard of before. Someone will come up and request it, I'll write it down, I'll go home and I'll look it up on YouTube or something like that, and hey, maybe it's a good song that I'd never heard of before, and so I'll make a note to buy that next time I'm buying some music. Okay, so requests can be very useful. Choosing a stage name. There's a good topic. Some DJs use stage names, some use the real names. I've had a ton of people ask me where my stage name, DJ Bolivia, came from. And I won't get into that in full detail right now because this video is already long enough. Maybe I'll do a separate video sometime to reenact it. But the short version is that myself and 2 of my roommates, Mark Karns and Drew Dudley, were having some beverages one night, and we were discussing the pros and cons of marketing yourself as a DJ on the web, and it turned into a gentleman's bet. And so it became my task to set up a website, and so we were trying to pick a stage name for me at the time, went through a bunch of different criteria and options, and we came up with Bolivia. So that's how my whole website got started, and why after many years of DJing discreetly and quietly under my own name, I started using DJ Bolivia. Now, is using a stage name a smart idea? Not necessarily. if I could go back, I would probably change it and have stuck with my own name. Now, the drawback is that, some stage names sound rather silly. And by using your own name, you really identify with your own personality, I think. I remember talking to Josh Gabriel of Gabriel in Dresden about this a few years ago, and he was asking why I didn't switch to using my own name from DJ Bolivia if I would have preferred to have kept my own name from the start. And unfortunately at that time, I said, I'm already kind of well established. Hundreds of thousands of people know who I am or have heard of this name. And also another problem is, at this point, all my websites, all my marketing use DJ Bolivia, and I've got some good internet real estate because nobody else was using that name, so I kind of snapped up all the, the right website names and stuff like that. And at that point, my real name, Jonathan Clark, that website wasn't available, that username wasn't available for Gmail, for my email account, for YouTube, for all sorts of stuff. So, knowing that, be very careful about what you pick as a stage name from the beginning, and it may not be a bad idea to try to use your own name. Your own name is probably taken in every sense, but it may be, in terms of the internet, but it may be that, somebody with your name that's taken it is a photographer or something like that. So all the websites and links and stuff relate to photography, so maybe you could use DJ in front. And so you'd have, say your name's Juan Martinez. You could have DJ Juan Martinez. And the actual Juan Martinez sites and everything might be taken by this photographer, but DJ Juan Martinez is wide open. Okay? So think very carefully about using a stage name. Consider using your own name because people know who you are. So at least your friends will have a better idea of who the DJ is at the start. And once you start to become a little bit more well-known, it's very hard to switch stage names. The only thing I would clarify is that once I start releasing a little bit more music, I kind of like to dabble in production of different styles of music. So not just tech house and house. I kind of like to play with trance, with drum and bass, with hip hop, stuff like that. And I think once I start releasing professional releases of styles other than electronica, if I start releasing hip hop stuff, I'm going to choose a different name for that so it doesn't confuse people that are used to hearing tribal tech house from me. And same thing when I'm playing more traditional, like alternative indie rock stuff, I may use my own name instead of Bolivia. So think very carefully before you choose a stage name because you may be stuck with it for a long time.
I can't stop smiling.